I used to check the nanny cam for cute moments, finger paints, snack time, tiny naps. Then, one night, the feed popped up on my phone by itself. I saw our living room at 2:13 a.m. The nanny was there, my husband was there, and my daughter was not in her crib. What happened in those next 20 minutes is the reason I haven't slept. The reason I'm writing this, and the reason I still haven't told my husband what I saw. Because I don't understand it, and I'm afraid of what it means. I'm going to start with the parts that make sense. Maybe if I line them up one after the other, a pattern will appear that doesn't make me sound delusional, paranoid, or cruel. My husband, Ethan, is the kind of person people describe as steady. He owns 2 of everything he likes: sneakers, hoodies, the brand of cereal he swears tastes better stale, and throws away almost nothing. He keeps warranties in a labeled folder and backs up his phone every Sunday night. Since our daughter Sophie was born, he has been steady for both of us. He swaddled faster, he burped better, he remembered the pediatrician's check-ins before I did. He also found us a nanny when my maternity leave ended. Her name is Mara. The agency sent 3 profiles. She was the least experienced, but the best reviewed. Warm, attentive, professional boundaries. Those were the words in the comments. Mara is tall, a little awkward, soft-spoken. Kids seem to melt against her. Sophie did. I work from home 3 days a week. The nanny cam started because of me. Not because I distrusted Mara, but because my anxious brain wanted a window I could open if the day got too quiet. We placed the camera in the corner of the living room, angled toward the playmat, and another in Sophie's nursery. We told Mara about both. She said it made her feel safer too. The first weeks were ordinary in the way new routines are ordinary. Snack cups, board books, naps. When Sophie cried, Mara never let it go more than a minute. When Ethan got home from work, he relieved her right away and paid her to the minute. Steady, like I said. Then, 2 months in, the first odd thing happened. The timeline in the camera app showed a gap. Just a thin, gray slice where motion should have been. Like someone had rubbed the image clean with an eraser. It was at 2:18 p.m., a time when Sophie is almost always awake. I assumed it was our Wi-Fi. I forgot it. The second odd thing was a sound. I was on a video call and muted, but the living room camera feed in a tiny window showed Mara on the floor with Sophie. The sound wasn't on, but I saw Sophie's head lift. I saw Mara's face tilt toward the hallway, as if she'd heard something I hadn't. She stood, scooped Sophie up, and walked out of frame. 10 seconds later, the feed jumped. The timestamp advanced 4 minutes. There were no frames in between. When the image returned, Sophie was on the playmat, fussing like she'd just been put down. I unmuted myself and pretended to take notes, though my notes were blank after that. I wanted to tell Ethan. I didn't. The thing about steady people is that they don't know what to do with your cracks. He would tighten a screw, not replace the beam. He would say, "It's the app." He'd be right enough that I'd stop there. I told myself to stop watching. I didn't. If anything, I watched more, but only in the way a person watches the ocean when they're waist deep, ready to pretend every wave is ordinary until one isn't. It was ordinary the night it happened. Tuesday. Rain in the forecast. We put Sophie down at 7:25 p.m., earlier than usual, because she was rubbing her eyes at dinner. I set the dishwasher. Ethan answered emails on the couch. At 9:30 p.m., Mara texted, "Forgot my water bottle. Can I swing by tomorrow?" Ethan said, "I'll bring it in the morning." Mara replied with a thumbs up. We went to bed at 10:30 p.m. I woke at 2:10 a.m., no reason I can name, and reached for my phone. A notification from the camera app was there. Motion detected, living room. I'm not the kind of person who gets up for every creak, but the house felt tuned, like a string pulled tight. I tapped the notification. The feed opened to the living room. The room was dim. The glow from the streetlight lined the curtains in silver. Our couch was a long, pale shape. The playmat lay empty. And there, in the middle of the room, stood Mara. Her hair was loose. She wore a dark sweater I'd never seen, and wet shoes. Water pooled on the rug beneath them. She stared at something out of frame, left of the camera's eye. I pinched to zoom and cursed softly. The app fought me and then relented. Ethan stepped into view. He wasn't dressed, just pajama pants. He looked rumpled, surprised, but not startled the way you or I might be to find a person standing in our living room at 2 a.m. His mouth moved. I couldn't hear the audio. The app sometimes lagged. The microphone icon stayed gray no matter how hard I tapped it. Mara said something back. She held out her hands the way you do when you mean, "I'm not here for trouble." Then Ethan glanced toward the hallway, toward Sophie's room. He moved left and Mara followed him out of frame. I stared at the empty rectangle of our living room. The clock on my phone said 2:13 a.m. Sophie's camera was one swipe away. I swiped. The nursery was dark, just the nightlight's amber halo. The crib was empty. I don't remember standing. I do remember the cold of the hallway floor under my feet and the impossible object of the closed front door. I remember the urge to run and the urge to be still arguing in the same second. I went for the nursery first. The crib was made. The blanket was folded at the foot the way I fold it, not the way Ethan does with that sharp hotel triangle. The monitor, a separate device from the camera, showed the subtle, slow lines of breathing it always shows, like a quiet tide. But there was no baby. The sound register said, "No noise detected." My mind tried to find the file for this scenario in its drawer. It found a handful of unrelated things: fire drills from elementary school, a news story about a daycare mixing up babies during pickup, a dream I had when I was 5 about my mother being 2 mothers, each insisting she was the real one. I went to the living room, empty except for the wet footprints of 2 people leading down the hallway and stopping where the rug meets the hardwood, as if those feet had evaporated. "Ethan?" I called. My voice sounded normal, like I was asking if he wanted tea. "Ethan?" I don't know how long I stood there waiting for an answer. I know that my phone vibrated and I looked down and the camera app had crashed. When I reopened it, both feeds showed still frames with yesterday's timestamps. I stared at the tiny battery icon of the nursery monitor. Full, no motion, no noise, no baby. Then the baby cried. It wasn't a wail. It was the little quarrel Sophie makes when her pacifier falls sideways in her mouth and she wants it nudged back. The sound came from the nursery. I ran. I don't remember running. Sophie was there, in the crib, wriggling. Her hair was plastered damp against her forehead. She smelled like cold air, like rain. She reached up for me. I lifted her, pressed my nose to her cheek. "You're okay," I said to both of us. Ethan stepped into the doorway. His face was paler than I've ever seen it, but his voice was steady. "What's wrong?" I looked back at him, my mouth opening and closing around 3 different answers. "You were just in the living room with Mara." Mara came in the middle of the night. Sophie wasn't here. I chose none of them. I heard my own voice say, "She was fussing. It's nothing." He nodded. He came close and touched her back. He didn't mention Mara. He didn't look like a man who had been downstairs with anyone. He looked like a person who had just woken up. I didn't sleep after that. I lay next to Sophie in our bed because I couldn't put her back in the crib. Ethan fell asleep again. He didn't dream aloud, which he sometimes does when he's stressed. He slept like a steady person. I watched the ceiling until the ceiling felt watched back. In the morning, the rug was dry. I rolled it back and checked. No damp underlayer. The camera app opened as if nothing had happened. The timeline showed movement at 6:02 a.m. when I picked Sophie up to change her diaper, and at 7:15 a.m. when Ethan made coffee, and at 8:05 a.m. when Mara arrived. I opened the door to her and made the same face I always make, the face that says, "Welcome to our routine." I waited to see if she would flinch at the sight of me. She smiled. She had her hair in a braid and wore the green sweater she often wears. She said, "Morning," and handed me a new pack of wipes she'd found on sale. I said, "Morning," like a person whose entire night had not rearranged itself into a shape she didn't recognize. Ethan left for work. He kissed Sophie's forehead and said, "Love you, bug." He kissed me and said, "Text me if you need anything." He did not mention a wet rug or a 2 a.m. visitor. I hovered in the kitchen while Mara buckled Sophie into her high chair. "How was your night?" I asked, the words tasting like bait. "Good," Mara said. "You?" "I woke up around 2, I said. "Thought I heard something." Mara tilted her head. Oh? I must have dreamed it, I said. She nodded. I do that sometimes. Wake up convinced I forgot to lock my door. Did you? I asked. Though what I meant was, were you here? Did you step into my living room at 2:13 a.m. and stare at my husband like time had folded in half? No, she said. I double-checked. I have this superstition. If I say it out loud after I lock it, I remember better. She smiled. Locked, like that. I watched her cut banana into coins for Sophie. Her hands were steady. Sophie flapped her arms and made her delighted chirp. The world arranged itself into a scene I recognized. I let it. I deleted the app from my phone at 9:30 a.m. That felt like action. It felt like choosing peace. By noon, I was reinstalling it. The timeline loaded. Motion events stacked in little gray cards like an accusation. I tapped back to Tuesday night. There was nothing between 10:31 p.m. and 6:02 a.m. A clean block of sleep according to the machine. I considered calling the agency. I imagined what I'd say. Hi, quick question. Do you vet your caregivers for nocturnal teleportation? I laughed out loud, sharply enough that Sophie looked up at me from the floor, and then laughed too, because that's what babies do when they see your teeth. I told myself a new story. I dreamed it. The notification was old. The wet footprints were condensation from the AC, or a spill, or memory inventing texture. I held that story in my mouth like a lozenge that didn't dissolve. That night, I moved Sophie's portable bassinet into our room. She's technically too old for it, but she's small and the mesh sides are high. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Regression? He asked. Temporary, I said. Until this week is over. Work is a lot. He nodded. Whatever helps. At 1:57 a.m., the notification came again. Motion detected. Living room. I didn't tap it. I lay there with my phone face down on my chest and felt my heartbeat lift it like a tiny boat on small waves. I told myself, if someone is in the house, the locks are still on. If someone is in the house, the alarm will trip. If someone is in the house, the dog, who died 5 years ago, will bark. I counted to 100. I counted again. I turned the phone screen over with the kind of care you use to lift a bandage. The feed showed the couch, the curtains, the playmat. Empty. The timestamp said 1:59 a.m. The motion card, when I tapped it, played a 2-second loop of nothing and rewarded me with a little green checkmark that said, reviewed. When I finally slept, I dreamed of the ocean. Not the water, but the horizon, a line that becomes a wall if you sail toward it long enough. On Thursday afternoon, I left my home office and stood by the doorway to the living room so Sophie wouldn't see me from the floor and get distracted. I watched Mara read Goodnight Moon in a soft voice. She doesn't read like I do. I always add commentary. Look at that silly cow. She reads like the book is a spell and her job is not to break it. When she reached, "Good night, nobody," Sophie squealed. Mara looked up and saw me. She smiled. "We're negotiating nap," she said. "I can take over," I offered. I don't know why I offered. It came out like a reflex. "If you want," she said. We were going to do milk and then a walk. "I'll do milk," I said. Mara handed Sophie to me. When our fingers touched, something passed between us that I recognized from roller coasters. The second when you understand what you've chosen and your body says, "No turning back now." Mara didn't flinch. She said, "See you at 3," and gathered her bag to leave. At the door, she turned. "Do you want me to charge the extra time when I stay past 6? I blinked. "Past 6? On Tuesday?" she said lightly. "I assumed it was okay. You looked tired. So I stayed until 6:45. I was speechless. Tuesday? I finally managed. "We put Sophie down early on Tuesday." Mara nodded, her face uncomplicated. "I rocked her after. In your room. You were already asleep. Ethan said you needed it." There was a line, thin as a thread, that connected this statement to something I could live in. The line snapped. "I must have forgotten," I said. "It happens," Mara said. "Grown-ups need naps too." She left, quiet as a cat. I stood where she'd left me and felt the house tilt a degree. The floor didn't move, gravity did. My phone was on the counter. I opened the camera app. The timeline for Tuesday showed nothing after 10:31 p.m. At 3:10 p.m., Ethan texted, "Running late, can you handle pickup?" He meant the dry cleaning. I said yes. At 5:12 p.m., he texted again, "Be home by 6:30. I stared at his words. The Tuesday version of him had been home. The Tuesday version of him had been awake at 2:13 a.m. and had looked toward the hallway the way people look toward what they can't bear you to see. At 10 p.m., I told Ethan I wanted to try something. "Let's put the cameras on different Wi-Fi names," I said. "Split the signal. Maybe that helps the lag." He shrugged. "If you want." He's not a camera person. He trusts the act of being in a room more than he trusts the act of recording it. "I can reboot the router." He did. I changed the names. I wrote them down. I watched the feeds reconnect. I watched the battery icons tremble back to life. I watched the timeline draw clean lines. I wanted the technology to fail in a way I could fix. I wanted it to blame. At 2:04 a.m., the baby monitor displayed no signal for 1 second, then 2, then 5. The Nanny Cam app stayed connected. The living room showed the couch. The hallway was a darker ribbon beyond it. I felt the old tide rise in my chest. I got out of bed. I didn't go to the living room. I went to the basement. We don't keep much down there, some boxes, a Christmas tree, the utility closet with the breaker panel. I stood in the dark and waited for my eyes to adjust, and told myself I was being brave. The air had that mineral coolness that basements have. Pipes ticked overhead. I don't know why I went. Maybe because I needed a space that hadn't been on camera. Maybe because I wanted to stand under our life and see if it still held. I heard footsteps above me in the living room. Not loud. Not sneaky either. The kind a person makes when they are certain they're not alone and want to be heard. I put my hand on the breaker panel door. A voice said my name. It wasn't Ethan's. It wasn't Mara's. It was my mother's voice from 20 years ago, the way she said my name when she found me out of bed at night reading under the covers. My mother is alive, but she wasn't in my house. The voice said my name again, and I understood the trick. It wasn't an imitation. It was my memory of her voice, perfect enough that it could pass. I took my hand off the breaker box. I stood very still. I felt, under the stillness, a cold understanding. This house contained a speaker I had not installed. "Who's there?" I said. I don't know why I said it. I knew that whoever could use my mother's voice wouldn't answer in their own. The lungs of the house held their breath. Then the basement bulb flickered. A stutter, then a hum. The kind that makes you squint without meaning to. When the light steadied, a shape occupied the space by the stairs. A person could have been there, but there wasn't a person there. It was a silhouette with no body, like a shadow without its owner. This is where a reasonable story would revoke your reading privileges and tell you to get out. I stayed. That is my defect. "Sophie," the not voice said. Not like my mother now, but like me. Like I sound when I discover a forgotten pacifier under the couch. Relief braided with small triumph. I ran. I didn't run gracefully. I banged my shin on a box and yelled a word that would make Sophie giggle in the morning when she repeated it. The nursery door was open. The bassinet was empty. The crib was empty. The nightlight was off, though neither Ethan nor I had switched it. The living room was lit by the streetlight. The couch was a pale whale in a gray sea. Ethan stood by the hallway, his shoulders set like a man who had just stepped into the wrong movie and decided its plot anyway. "Mara?" I said, because part of me was not done with the easy suspect. Ethan flinched, just slightly, like I had picked a scab I didn't know he had. He said, "She's not here." "Where is Sophie?" I asked. The calm ripped from my voice like paper. He looked at me in a way that told me he had a different conversation happening in his head, one where I had already agreed to something. "Do you trust me?" he asked. It's unfair, the ways people deploy that question. I answered, yes, because a person doesn't unlearn their own marriage in one night, even if the marriage has been wrong about the dark. He nodded once. He held out his hand. I took it. He led me down the hallway and past the nursery to the door of the little storage room we use for coats and the vacuum and the suitcase we take to weddings. He opened it. There was no light inside. He squeezed my hand the way he does before a roller coaster drops. "Look," he said. I looked. The storage room wasn't a room, not in the way rooms behave. The wall to the left angled the wrong way. My eyes followed it and got lost. The suitcase looked farther than it should be. Our coats hung like people do in dreams, their sleeves suggesting arms. And there, on the floor where the vacuum usually leans, sat Sophie. She wasn't crying, she wasn't scared. She was examining the bristles of the vacuum head like a scientist. She looked up when she saw me and clapped, a new skill she'd mastered that afternoon. I made a noise that wasn't a word. It was the sound a body makes when it decides all its functions need review. I reached for her. Ethan stopped me with a hand on my wrist, gentle but unmovable. "Wait," he said. "Watch." He crouched. He didn't touch Sophie. He looked past her to a corner that the geometry of the room did not permit. He said softly, "We see you." The air changed. That's the only phrase I have. The pressure of the moment stuffed my ears. The light from the hallway bent. The coat sleeves twitched like they had remembered they were sleeves. Sophie giggled. The vacuum head lifted 3 inches off the ground and set itself down again, a small polite demonstration. Ethan said, "This is why I didn't tell you. I didn't know how." I am not a person who owns a vocabulary for this. I know the right numbers to call when you smell gas. I know the recommended interval for changing smoke detector batteries. I know how to fall asleep to the sound of a dishwasher. This was not that kind of problem. "What is it?" I asked. "Who?" He shook his head. "I don't know who." He looked at Sophie. "It started before she was born. Little things. I thought I was stressed. Then after, it grew curious. I think it likes her." "Likes," I said, a word that buckled under its assignment. "It doesn't hurt her." His voice was careful. "It moves things, hums. The first time I watched it rock the bassinet on a night you were so tired you slept through your alarm. It stopped when I said thank you." He swallowed. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be afraid in your own house. The world is a certain way for a long time. Then it is a different way. The shift is not your fault, but it is yours to live with." I thought of the camera gaps, the wet footprints, the vanished rug damp that left no evidence. I thought of Mara in the living room at 2:13 a.m. and realized I had assumed the wrong verbs. Maybe she wasn't in the living room. Maybe she was seen in the living room. Maybe the house had played me a memory. "Tuesday," I said. "Mara." He shook his head again. "I woke up and the living room was visited. It showed me her, then you, then me. Like it wanted me to know it could. I think it likes being watched." I almost laughed, because what else do you do with a sentence like that? The coat sleeves did not laugh. The vacuum did not laugh. Sophie clapped again and dropped the pacifier. It rolled toward the impossible corner and stopped as if the corner wanted it, then thought better of it and returned it by a fraction, a small apology. I picked up Sophie. This time Ethan didn't stop me. She was warm, real. Her heartbeat laddered against my chest like a small animal's. She smelled like baby shampoo and rain, and I decided the rain could mean nothing. "Why the cameras?" I asked. "Why the gaps?" Ethan let out a breath that wasn't relief. "I think it doesn't like being captured. Or maybe it does, but on its terms." He glanced toward the living room. "When you check the feed, it checks you back." I realized then that I was shaking. Not the delicate tremor of nerves, but a deep, slow vibration like a car idling. My body was processing the tax on belief. "So, what?" I whispered. "We live with it?" He looked at me with the kind of honesty I both love and find unbearable in him. "I don't know what else to do. I've tried ignoring it. It gets louder. I tried speaking to it. It quiets sometimes. I think it understands please and thank you. I know that sounds insane." Insane. The word opened like a trap door in my mind and threatened to swallow me. I made a choice. I closed it. "Okay," I said, though it wasn't okay. "Rules. It's what I do when the world shifts. I make rules like sandbags in a flood. No touching Sophie, no moving things at night. No voices. I couldn't say my mother's voice. If it wants to exist, it follows rules. Ethan nodded, eyes wet. Say them out loud, he said softly. It listens better when you do. I felt like a fool. I felt like the only adult in a room with an invisible child. I said the rules out loud. The house listened. The air unwrinkled by a millimeter. For a week, nothing happened. The camera timeline looked like a heartbeat, small spikes, ordinary life. Mara came and went and never mentioned staying late on Tuesday again. I almost asked her, and then I didn't, because if her memory disagreed with mine, I didn't know what it would cost to reconcile them. On the 8th day, the nanny cam sent me a clip at 11:42 a.m. It was a short, Sophie on her playmat, babbling. In the corner, a stack of blocks rearranged themselves into a tower. It wasn't menacing. It was the kind of magic a child's book would draw with soft colors. The caption, auto-generated by the app, said, "Motion detected like it always does." I watched the tower stand. Sophie clapped. Then the top block slid down and rested on her lap as if to share itself. I said thank you without meaning to, and the living room light brightened by a hair. I told myself that gratitude was a leadership strategy and not a surrender. I told myself that rules are how families work, even if one member is a resident minus a body. Ethan and I didn't tell anyone. Who would we tell? Who would we ask for a referral to a specialist with a business card that reads, "Paranormal mediation for domestic settings"? We kept it. We tended it the way you tend compost. We put our scraps into it and asked it to turn them into something that didn't smell like rot. And then, last night happened. I was on the couch with Sophie, dozing on my chest after a feverish afternoon. The thermometer read 38.3 degrees. Not panic level, but not nothing. Ethan made tea. He is the kind of person who makes tea correctly. Pre-warm the mug, steep for the right number of minutes, never squeeze the bag. He set the mug on the table and sat, and for a few minutes we were a picture on a pamphlet about ordinary family evenings. The lights flickered. Not a power issue flicker, not the whole house. Just the lamp nearest the hallway. It dimmed until the shade was a silhouette and then brightened. I felt the air pressure shift. The tell I now recognize the way sailors recognize the low whistle that means a storm changing its mind. Sophie's rules, I said out loud gently, as if I were reminding a toddler about inside voices. It's bedtime, no moving things. The lamp steadied. I thought we were done. Then the baby monitor on the table, a separate system from the cameras, battery-backed, woke up and displayed a black screen studded with white noise specks, like snow. The systems we trusted started to disagree with themselves. I felt Sophie's temperature against my collarbone. Hotter. I touched her cheek. Too flushed. I shifted to get up, and the room, the geometry of it, bent again. Not like the storage closet, but like a funhouse mirror that doesn't think it's funny. "Please," I said to the room, ridiculous and sincere. "Not now." The monitor screen resolved into an image. Not the nursery, the storage closet. The coats hung like witnesses. And then in the bottom corner, the vacuum head angled itself. It rolled forward 3 inches. It tapped the threshold twice. Tap, tap, like a knock. Ethan stood. "What do you want?" he asked. The vacuum tapped once. Then the monitor cut to black. The living room lamp flickered to steady again. The air unwrinkled. Sophie whimpered and went limp in the way that means sleep has chosen her, not asked for permission. I carried her to the bedroom bassinet and laid her down, my hand on her chest. Her breathing was fast but even. I went back to the living room and looked at Ethan. We did not have new rules for this. We had no protocol for knocks from inside closets. "What do we do?" I asked. Ethan ran a hand over his face. "We wait," he said. "We watch." So I did. I watched the camera feed after he went to bed. I watched it until my eyes burned, and the app sent me that insulting little pop-up that suggests, "Take a break?" At 2:13 a.m., the living room feed flickered. For 1 second, the picture was not live. It was a recording. It showed the rug dark with wet, and the cartography of footprints I had seen that first night. Then the picture went live again. Clean rug, quiet house. The app asked, "Save clip?" I hit yes so hard my finger hurt. I replayed it and saw, in the saved version, something I didn't see the first time. The footprints weren't two people's. They were 3 sets, overlap running over overlap until it looked like 2. One set was smaller. The left foot of the smallest set turned a little in, the way Sophie's does when she tries to walk. I think it took her for a walk. That's the sentence I can't get rid of. I think the house took my daughter for a walk when I was asleep. At 3:05 a.m., the fever broke. The baby monitor graph showed the temperature drop. The nightlight's amber seemed warmer. I slept finally. And dreamed of our coats applauding. This morning, Mara arrived at 8:02 a.m. She put her bag down and went straight to the bassinet. The way people do when the person they're here for is the smallest one in the room. She brushed Sophie's hair with the soft bristle brush and said, "Big day yesterday?" The way someone says, "I missed something, didn't I?" I said, "She had a fever, it's gone." Mara nodded. "Good." She looked at me. "You look like you could sleep for a week." I laughed because crying would have been worse. "Maybe 2, I said. She hesitated. "This will sound weird," she said. I waited. I had room for weird. "I had a dream," she said. "That I came here at night and couldn't get in." She paused. "That I wasn't supposed to." She looked at me like the dream meant something to me, not her. "It was just a dream," I said, which is what you say when you want it to be true more than you want anything else. She nodded. "Probably. See you at 3. She put Sophie in the high chair. She cut banana coins. She read Goodnight Moon at nap time. The blocks stayed in their bin. The vacuum stayed against the closet wall like a tame thing. When Ethan came home tonight, he looked at me the way people do when they share a secret with you and want to know if you've turned it into a sentence you can live in yet. I made dinner. I laughed at his story about the office. We moved through our choreography, and all day I haven't told him about the saved clip with 3 sets of wet prints. I haven't told him that the smallest left foot turns inward like Sophie's. I haven't told him that I have been whispering thank you to a thing in my house so it doesn't show me what else it can do. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm writing this in a place where strangers decide who the villain is, and sometimes you learn something true about yourself from the verdict. So, AITA for not telling my husband what I saw on the nanny cam, for keeping the evidence to myself for 1 day, maybe 2, because I need to decide whether the story of us is safer with fewer facts, for setting rules for something I don't understand, and then breaking my own first rule. Don't keep secrets before the ink is dry. I love him. He is steady. He kept this from me because he thought fear was heavier than truth. Maybe he was right for a while. Maybe I'm doing the same math now with different variables. I don't want to be the person who chooses not to know. I also don't want to give the house a reason to show off. I am afraid that telling him about the small footprints will make the thing in our closet think we like it when it takes our daughter for walks. Tomorrow, I'll tell him. Maybe by the time you read this, I'll have said it out loud in our kitchen where the light feels honest. Maybe. For tonight, I'm asking strangers. If the world is stranger than we admit, and we share a mortgage with the strangeness, is it a sin to keep a secret for 1 night while you decide whether you're brave enough to keep living here? Or am I the asshole for not telling my husband the second I knew? If this were your home, would you reveal the nanny cam clip immediately? Or wait until you had a plan and a way to explain it without breaking your partner? Drop your verdict in the comments. Is it not the asshole, NTA? Or you're the asshole, YTA? Or maybe everyone sucks here, ish? And most importantly, why? Your take might be the one that finally nudges me to press play in the kitchen and say, watch.